بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله تعالى وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Brothers and sisters, I just recently published an article on the Mawarid Lifestyle website about relationships and sex education, titled "What Parents Need to Know About Relationships Education in Primary Schools." Now, I'm hoping that inshallah this is part of a series of articles and videos addressing this issue and helping parents and members of the community just becoming better informed about the issue, about what the law has to say, about what the possibilities are in terms of influencing some of the practices on the ground, especially in the schools around relationships and sex education. This has been going on for some time. For the most part, the Muslim community response hasn't been effective. There have been some amazing individual efforts by people to try to raise awareness and so on. But living in a place like Tower Hamlets, honestly, my observation is that there really hasn't been enough traction, and it's quite depressing to see how poorly informed parents are, how completely disengaged masajid are, how completely disengaged madrasa teachers are with this issue, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of a constructive, coordinated solution, response to this issue. Now, look, this isn't some kind of uh, uh, trivial issue, right? This is potentially our children being exposed to ideas that that can plant seeds in them, essentially resulting in completely unpredictable consequences. I've often said that the modern world itself as a whole is a bit of a social experiment. It's not a bit of a social experiment, it is a social experiment. Essentially, modernity and the whole, this is an exercise in seeing what it's like to live life in ways that human beings have never lived before, right? And we don't know what the end result is going to be. Often when these types of things happen and children are exposed to things that they aren't exposed to they haven't been exposed to previously, the biggest concern isn't that a known negative consequence is going to be the result of it. My greatest concern is that we don't know what the result is. We've absolutely no idea what's going to happen, right? We don't know what the um, um, what the consequence is of my 8-year-old, 9-year-old being exposed to images of sexual organs, or my 10-year-old, 11-year-old being exposed to conversations around same-sex families or same-sex marriage, etc. Now, we have to consider how to respond to this issue, and my article addressed some of it. And I understand a lot of people don't like reading, so I'm following up with a video, inshallah. I'll say some of the same things, and I'm hoping that this is going to be beneficial to people. So, firstly, what is actually happening, right? So, from September 2020, all primary schools will need to provide relationships education and health education. And there are several parts to a broad curriculum area, right? There's relationships education, health education, and sex education. There's 3 parts to it, right? In primary school, relationship education and health education is compulsory, right? Now, in a lot of schools, some of this is already in place, which is why many of you, many parents in the community has been trying to tackle this issue, uh, in our own ways. But that's because it was recommended to schools, right, that these things are taught. From September 2020, it will become a requirement for schools to teach these things. So if, for example, my children's school didn't adopt RSE, right? It wasn't adopted at all, okay? From September 2020, they're going to have to adopt it, right? So relationship education is going to have to happen. So that's something to bear in mind. And then health education as well as a part of it is also going to be compulsory. Sex education is non-compulsory in primary schools. So remember, we're talking about primary schools here. Sex education is not compulsory in primary schools. However, the DfE recommends schools to have a program in place, just as it did for SRE previously. That means that just like many schools that we're all familiar with have adopted SRE, sometimes controversial SRE, because of the DfE's recommendation to adopt it. Similarly, although sex education is clearly not compulsory, many schools, on the DfE's recommendation, or just on the head teachers or the governor's preference, will choose elements of sex education or a program of sex education. So it's important. Not all aspects of sex education are bad, and I'll talk about this in a minute. But it's important for people to be aware that there may be this change in their children's schools. Okay. An important thing that I believe isn't said enough is in this whole curriculum area, the relationships and sex education and health education, a number of things are covered, the majority of which are very good. Right? The majority of it is very good and very positive. It's not all about same-sex relationships and same-sex families and etc. It's not about LGBT education. Often it's referred to in that way. The majority of it is non-controversial and is actually very, very good for our children. And it actually, I'll speak, in the case of the Muslim community, there's lots and lots of things actually we should be teaching our children ourselves, but we don't, right? For whatever reason, girls are not appropriately and adequately taught about their periods, etc. Boys are not taught about certain things that parents leave out because of embarrassment, because they're sensitive, etc. And so on. And this void, there's a void there that schools have to step in and fill. Some of the content in relationship education is about developing good characteristics in order to have good relationships. It's about families. It's about having caring friendships. It's about having respectful relationships. It's about staying safe. It's about staying safe online, etc., etc. Right? So there's a whole list of learning outcomes that you can see in my article. Inshallah, it's there at the bottom as an appendix. Please familiarize yourself with all of it so that you know. If you're gonna go and have a conversation with a teacher in school or with the head teacher or the deputy head teacher or school governor, you don't end up with ranting as though the whole thing is bad, right? Let's accept most of it is good, right? And therefore, any conversations about relationships and sex education or any attempt to object to it needs to focus on the objectionable aspects of it, all right, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, is there an LGBT component to relationship education, and is it a requirement? Okay, so here, when I read the particular act that addresses this issue, I actually had it nearby somewhere, but it's gone now. There's no mention of LGBT education or same-sex families or relationships, etc., in the law itself, right? There is reference to the Equalities Act, And it is really from that reference that the DFE has interpreted the law to include aspects of LGBT education. And in the DFE's statutory advice to schools about relationship education, there are two paragraphs basically that address aspects of LGBT education. In fact, it even goes as far as referring teachers to Stonewall, the group that basically campaigns for gay rights, for LGBT rights rather. It even kind of refers teachers to them to, for help in putting together schemes of work and so on. I actually found that quite strange, but it's definitely there, and there is a recommendation that an LGBT component is included in relationship education. Now, that may be just just a simple matter of teaching children that it isn't acceptable to discriminate against people in same-sex marriages, that same-sex marriages are also marriages in which there is love and etc. and care and so on, that homophobia is bad and so on and so forth, and it can go beyond that, right? Now, one, is it required? Two, what is my local authority going to do? What is my school going to do, as in my children's school going to do? Three, if they are going to adopt any aspect of it, what exactly is going to happen? Four, what about my religious background, my religious sensitivities, and making sure that my child is also protected from being exposed to ideas that I, as a parent, do not approve of. All of this is also part of the law. The law also covers this, and instructs teachers to consult parents, to take children's age into consideration, to take children's religious background into consideration, to take special needs and disabilities into consideration. All of this is also covered in the law. The law isn't just about teach this, right? It covers all of this. However, how it's done on the ground is up to the schools. How exactly it is converted into a curriculum, converted into a set of policies, and then how that is delivered in the classroom is up to local authorities, school governors, school leaders, school teachers. And it is here a lot of interpretation happens, right? A lot of personal preferences come into play. And it is here that the community and parents have to play a role to make sure that, at the basic level, that people are complying with the law, because we cannot take it for granted that they are, right? And secondly, I believe that the Muslim community should push for you know whatever ideal outcome that they want. That means that we should get clarity on whether the LGBT component is a requirement in primary schools. Uh, there's some conflicting information about this, and some groups say that it is a requirement. Others say it's not a requirement. The DFE appears to be saying it's a requirement, but some are saying that goes above and beyond the letter of the law. We need to seek clarity on this, right? If it is a requirement, we need to make sure that it is that whatever is covered does not go beyond the basic requirement of the law, so that not only is it not discriminatory against LGBT people, but it also by no means discriminates against the rights of children who are from religious families, whether they're Muslim or Christian, doesn't matter, and that their religious sensitivities are also not being trampled upon. Let's face it, right? The reality is that this thing plays out based on lobbies, based on campaigns, campaign groups, etc. So the government basically comes under pressure from multiple groups with multiple agendas, and it yields to whoever has the loudest voice, whoever makes the strongest argument, whoever whoever is knocking on the door the most frequently, and so on. And the Muslim community in that regard it hasn't been very good, right? I went through Stonewall's website, where it is actually advising on RSE and helping the LGBT community understand RSE and so on. And it isn't just information, right? They're constantly asking their community, their subscribers, their followers to write to your local MP, write to your local MP. Every time there is a possibility of a campaign, they're being asked to write to their local MP. There's no equivalent of that in the Muslim community. Now, if an MP or a local authority or a senior official is constantly receiving letters pushing one particular side of the argument, then chances are that it's going to be difficult for them to strike a balance where everybody's interests are equally looked after, especially given that many people who can represent the Muslim community position or can represent the position of religious communities often won't, because it's unpopular in the mainstream media, or these people get branded as extremists and so on, right? So there are all of these difficulties that come into play in this issue that ultimately result in us not being able to make a strong case for ourselves. So parents need to be extremely vigilant and make sure that on the ground, when it comes to what happens in your child's school, you're fully informed about what's going on, exactly what the policy is. For us, for example, I live in Tower Hamlets, and I'm part of the steering group in Tower Hamlets, and there is consultation via the steering group to try to see what the Muslim community wants, but there's a limit to what that can deliver. Right? Chances are the majority of Tower Hamlet schools are going to adopt the relationship education with the LGBT component in there. However, seeking advice from the Muslim community may result in certain things being done sensitively, but that is not necessarily the full extent of what can be achieved, right? And the Muslim community needs to consider what else we can do to minimize harm. And let me say this very clearly, right? It isn't discriminatory and intolerant for us to say, from a religious point of view, from a faith perspective, that for our children to be exposed to the normalization of LGBT ideas is harmful to them from our point of view, right? It is our right to be able to say this and to be able to feel this way, and it is by law. It is upon it is a duty upon the local authorities and the schools to ensure that this sensitivity is taken into consideration when they implement policy regarding RSE, or develop policy regarding RSE. And the government has instructed all schools to develop policies and has instructed all of them to consult parents. So if you aren't being consulted, or you don't know that there is a consultation going on, you should be wondering what's wrong, right? And schools are working to are going to start consultations now, right? So if you haven't heard anything, go and ask. I'll continue to provide more information about this, inshallah, and some more specifics around perhaps what we can do, what exactly the law says, what the scope is. One of my greatest concerns is we're so laid back about these issues that we don't even bother. Like, we don't bother reading material, we don't bother watching the videos. This video is going to be too long for some people. It's like this issue isn't important enough, to watch the full video and fully understand what's going on, right? The issue isn't important enough to go and open your phone and go to the article and read it and then read up a little bit more. We have to take this seriously, and be informed about the issue, and make sure that we have a balanced, proportionate response, not a response that throws the baby out with the bathwater, treats the whole thing as if it's LGBT, the whole thing as if it's controversial, and then we start being aggressive and confrontational and and intimidating and so on. That's not necessary. The best way to proceed with this is to proceed through discussion, through engagement, through dialogue, convince people of our point of view, right? That is the best way to do this. And what parents have to understand that they play the biggest role. Parents have to really discuss among themselves what is going on. You have to be informed about what your school's policy is, and schools have to understand that harmony between the school management and teachers and parents is paramount, is extremely important to ensure that children's education isn't compromised in any way, and therefore it is vitally important that a balanced approach is taken in this, so that, for example, and I'll be straight here, right? If it isn't necessary, if there is no reason for the LGBT element to be taught in a particular school, right? Because there's no children in that school from LGBT families, and there's like a 90% Muslim community population in that school. 90% of the children are from the Muslim community. Why would the LGBT component be taught if it isn't required by law? So these are the things that we have to basically explore, and these are the questions that we have to ask of our schools. Okay, inshallah, I'm going to try and create a dedicated page or section on the Mawarid Lifestyle website addressing RSE, and I will signpost as many resources as I can, time permitting, inshallah ta'ala. Just make dua that I can get this done. So far, I'll put up this video. The article's already out there. Watch the video, read the article, find out as much as you can, speak to your children's school, get involved. And I'm focusing right now in this video on primary schools. It is a slightly different story when it comes to secondary schools, and perhaps I'll speak about that in a separate video, inshallah. I'm also hoping, this is going to be a difficult one, I'm also hoping to do some videos in Bengali, inshallah ta'ala. It's going to be really hard. Explaining all of this in Bengali is going to make me sweat, but I'm going to try my best. All right, Jazakumullah khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable us to bring our children up on Islam, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect them and safeguard them. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.